Hello, this is LJ Haydorn, and I will be talking about one of the factors of role-playing games, tabletop-based role-playing games. One of the elements that we will be looking at, this is for those who are unfamiliar, is dice. So normally you will buy dice. I would suggest that everyone who is playing buy their own set. A lot of times they come in a container. And these containers will have 6 or 7 dice contained inside, depending on the manufacturer. A lot of times there tends to be 7. Here is an example of 7 dice. Now normally they all come like one particular type of color pattern. These are just happen to be some random dice. So let me go ahead and cover each of these and how to read them for those who are maybe unfamiliar. Alright. So, our first set of dice that we're looking at are what's called a 4-sided dice, or a D4. And a D4, they come in a variety of colors, again, just like any of the dice do, is a dice with 4 different sides. It's a pyramid shape. And your D4, when you roll the dice, there are 2 ways to possibly read the dice, depending on what kind of D4 it is. The sets I have currently, the ones that you can actually read, the number at the top, it has the number 4 here, the number 4 up top, and the number 4 up top on the 3 sides that are facing upwards. And that particular case, what you rolled is a 4. There are other dice though, and you can't see them on these dice, but there's a number at the bottom instead, and it's not at the corners. And the same number is on all 3 sides of the bottom. So you, in particular, like this is number 3, number 3, number 3 at the bottom, and that's how you would read that dice. So that's a D4, as they like to call it. Now the next set of dice, next set up, is called a D6, or 6-sided dice. So most games that you play nowadays, in board games or whatever, tend to be 6-sided. So you would normally roll the dice and read the top number. That is what you rolled. In this particular case, a 5. So the next set of dice is our D8s, 8 sides. So it's just 2, well, they're like little pyramids shaped, put together here. So 4 on either side. You would roll the dice and you read the top number. So in this particular case, we have rolled a 2. That is the top number, and that is what you would read out to somebody or give that information to whoever's running the game. The next set, now this is different. These are a little weird. These are D10s, or 10-sided dice. And in particular, what happens is you get 2 different sets of D10s. And these different sets of D10s are called percentile. So now the first D10 has 10 sides and has numbers 1, 2, 3 all the way up to 0, which is considered a 10. So normally, whatever when you roll the dice, the number on the top is the number that you rolled. So in this case, a 2. The second D10 dice is called the percentile dice. And this one is a little different. It does have 10 sides, so that's why it's a D10. But when you roll it, there will be 2 numbers, and not like numbers 1 through 10. It will actually be number 10, 20, 30, 40, increments of 10, except when it gets to the hundreds. When it gets to the hundreds, it goes 0, 0. Well, possibly 0, 0. Depends on what you roll. Now, normally you would roll both of these dice together. And how you would read it is, I rolled a 40 on this dice and a 6 on this dice. So the number I rolled is 46. But there is one weird thing. When you roll a 0, 0, it has 2 possible meanings. If you roll a 0, 0 on the percentile dice, and on the other 10-sided dice, you roll anywhere between a 1 to a 9. That is either, like for instance, 1%. all the way up to 9, which is 9%. But if you happen to roll a 0 on the 10-sided dice and a 0, on your percentile dice, that number is read as 100. It's the only thing, because they don't in the game you can't roll 0 for a number, but you can roll 10 or 100%. So except when you're looking at using the 00s and any number besides the 0 on the 10 dice. So you can roll 1 to 9% or 100 in this configuration. Now, the next set of dice, these are 12-sided dice, and as the name states, it has 12 sides to it. Very little odd creature. And just like the rest of the dice, when you roll the dice, the number on top is the number you roll. In this particular case, a 12. That would be the number. The last set of dice we have to worry about is the 20-sided dice. This is commonly used dice for a lot of different games. And how we would do this 20-sided dice, roll it. Number on top again is the number we pick. In this particular case, we rolled a 19. So that is what we would use as our dice roll when someone asks what did we roll. And depending on the game system you use, it really depends. Some game systems use lots of D6s, and they don't use some of these other dice at all. Other game systems use lots of D10s, and they may use very little of anything else. Other game systems primarily use D20s, and they will use the other ones as well. So the other dice can be used in any sort of variety of fashion. They aren't necessarily, dice are used for determinations of its randomness. So perhaps if you are swinging a small weapon, it may be so very little damage as a D4, giving you a score between 1 to 4, in this case of 2. Or you may find that you are swinging a nice big sword, or perhaps shooting a pistol, and you would be rolling an 8-sided dice perhaps, and you get a 3. You may find that instead you are rolling a larger weapon, maybe a big axe of some sort, two-handed axe perhaps, and they say, hey, you need to roll a D12. And I roll another 12. So that would be your score. Now, they may also say, now we talked about the D6, the D10s, D8s, all that stuff, and again, number of faces, that's what is applying. They may say you need to roll 3 D6. So that means 3 6-sided dice. So you would take those dice, you would roll it, and there's your results. And in particular, I got 3 5s. And that's a little odd to get, but it happens. So a lot of times it's usually a random assortment of numbers. So you would take 5, 10, 15. There you go. That would be your roll. But again, each game uses the dice in a different way. It can be from anything from I'm looking for something, what did you get? Or I found something. You might roll some other dice, percentile. Oh, well, you happen to find this item. Or I'm trying to talk to somebody and I'm trying to persuade them of something that I'm truthful in what I'm telling them, or that I'm false. So dice are in most games, most tabletop role-playing games, you're not going to find too often that dice aren't in a game. So this is what I consider a key element in a tabletop role-playing game for a majority of your games. And it may include any of these dice in any assortment, or it may include all the dice. So dice come in a variety of colors, as you can see, and patterns, manufacturers, quality as well. There are things as some of these dice, like in these containers, only cost you, say, $7 to $10 in a container of one of each of these dice. Other dice can be a lot more expensive. You may find some dice that are made of like mammoth bone or unique woods or stones or even precious gems. and those can go for a lot more. Or sometimes you'll even find things online that will be a large quantity of very cheap dice. And the thing is, though, when dice are made, it depends on some of these dice how they're made, especially if they look like a little bit of like a plastic dice of some sort. There's a cooking process that gets involved with these, and sometimes these things aren't cooked properly, and what happens is air bubbles form inside, and you get enough of those bubbles, or a big enough bubble, the dice could be weighted incorrectly, and you will end up rolling scores that the number may always be, or not always, but be fairly low most of the time, or fairly high most of the time, or fairly just 3s and 4s most of the time, like say on a 6-sided dice. So if a dice is truly well balanced, it will roll consistently with a different numbers. So it won't always come, or a majority of the time, coming up a certain number. So, but you can't tell unless you roll the dice, or you cut open the dice. And if you cut open the dice, it's useless at that point. So you can stick it back together, but you create a seam at that point, and that won't be any good for you to play. There's also some sort of weird thing about using salt water. I haven't tried that one out, but look it up on the internet. And that concludes my instruction on how dice play a part of tabletop role-playing game. But it just covers the general basics of what dice are. All right, thank you.